Welcome to Voices of Resilience, part of the Iron Sharpening Iron universe, where stories of strength, healing, and hope come to life. I'm your host, Davina Lyons, also known as Mama Lyons, and this space is dedicated to amplifying the voices of those who've turned pain into purpose. Each episode, we dive into real conversations about courage, self-discovery, and rising stronger than ever. So lean in, take a deep breath, and be inspired by the incredible voices of resilience, because every story has the power to heal. Welcome back to Voices of Resilience, where we amplify stories of courage and purpose. I am your host, Davina Lyons, also known as Mama Lyons. Today's conversation speaks deeply to community, justice, and the human spirit. I'm honored to be joined by Roicia Banks Hampton, an Afro-Indigenous Hopi social worker and community strategist, justice professional with over 15 years of experience, advocating for underserved communities. Roicia's work lives at the intersection of healing and systems change, and her story is rooted in lived experience, cultural wisdom, and profound loss, including the passing of her mother during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a conversation about grief, resilience, accountability, and what it truly means to build communities that care for one another. I'm so grateful that she's here. So let's get started. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I am so glad you're here. As we talked backstage prior, I was very inspired by some of the things that you've posted. I've actually been following you for a long time, and I was super inspired by just your candidness with your relationship with your father, and my condolences to him also passing. So both your parents, you have, I know you've lost both your parents, but at the same time, there's been a great deal of strength and resolve. And I know you're going to share a bit about that. So I'm just glad that you're here, because this is about voices of resilience. This is about people being able to show not so much about falling, but it's about getting up and about what you do moving forward and how you move. So I'm so excited that you're going to share with our audience. And we are live streaming all across the place, so it's going to be great for everybody to hear. So why don't you start out by just telling us who you are in your words?
Yes. Well, thank you again for having me. My name is Roicia Banks Hampton. I am 36 years old. I'm Afro-Indigenous. I've been married to the absolute love of my life, Warren. We live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was born and raised in Phoenix. I was raised throughout Arizona. Predominantly, I was raised on tribal land in northern Arizona, on the Hopi reservation, which is a little north of Flagstaff. And that's kind of where I identify as home. A lot of my upbringing, a lot of my values, a lot of trauma really stems from that period of my life. And it also helped me get to where I am today in terms of being a social worker and doing the work that I get to do with community. So I think there's a lot of different facets of me. I love to travel. I've been to 18 countries so far. Some of those a couple of times over. I love food. I love culture. I love all things food. I love cooking at home. I am a self-proclaimed chef and critic. So when I'm not at home, cooking with my husband, that's probably the second most favorite thing we love to do is go out and eat and try restaurants. So
yeah, I've seen some videos where you guys are cooking. Actually, I've seen some. You have some great clips, great videos, and
yeah,
I told you I sort of stalk.
yeah.
So
Well, at least you admit it.
I sort of stopped. Well, and I've been in Phoenix area for many, many years, and of course I've seen your husband around, and so I've seen you as well, but we just haven't had a chance to really connect. But I see that you're doing some really cool things, and I'm very interested. You say Afro-Indigenous. I love that.
Mhm.
Honor to being Hopi as well.
Yeah.
So I love that. So how has your cultural identity helped shape the way you approach healing, justice, and community building?
Yeah, I think I want to start first by saying I am adopted. And I was adopted when I was 8. And so my bloodline is my father is Black, African American from Arkansas. And my mother is Native American, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska from that area and white. When I was adopted because of ICWA in the Indian Child Welfare Act,
Right.
I had to be adopted into a Native American family. And so my adopted mother was Hopi, and then that's where I was raised. And so most of which I love sharing this because at first I used to be so ashamed, like, oh, I'm just a res girl. But now that I am grown, I'm like, I had the best non-colonized, non-indoctrinated experience to be really shaped into the person that I have been able to become. A lot of things that I know that I experienced growing up, of course, alcoholism is a real thing, a lot of substance abuse and,
Mhm.
and all of those traumas are real across communities. It's not limited to
Mhm.
Indigenous communities, but I grew up where it was very common to see intergenerational living in one home, you know,
Mm.
um, multiple families in a small home. And, you walk in the living room is like 3 people's bedrooms, and so I just grew up in a different, humble kind of lifestyle. And I didn't necessarily think it was bad. I just knew it was different because we used to have that going back and forth between the city and the res, just kind of. And so it wasn't like I was ignorant to what was out there, but I loved being on the res because of the isolation. But also, like I said, there's some trauma in there, but the
Mhm.
main thing is the culture. And so if you know anything about Arizona is home to 21 different tribes that
Mhm.
are federally recognized. My tribe is one of them. And I want to say it's the best one. But
Of
because
course.
so much culture, and we have language still. We're very fortunate to have language, culture, and ceremony. And so those sorts of things I was really raised in. I cannot emphasize enough, like they will shame you if you don't know your language, because a lot of what we do is centered around language. And so at a young age, I learned the language, being in ceremony and going through puberty and all of those different experiences. I kind of paid attention. I paid attention to how our clan members and our clan family came to the home to help us with whatever it was to get things done faster and quicker and as a unit, as a group, as a community, as a village. And I took note to those things all my life, and I didn't understand the individualism that America kind of prides itself on, get your own house, get your own this and your own family and be away. And if we go back to the res, like everybody lives in the same house, and and then you can have like daycare in the house. Like you don't need daycare because your auntie or your sister can watch your kids. And so there was just this communal living that was deep seated and deep rooted in me. And being able to go to college really opened up my eyes to, oh, wait a minute, there's
Mhm.
some different cultural experiences here. So through that experience, Now, I will say being biracial was also very challenging in that there's obviously prejudice that lives among communities and cultures, and that's a real thing. I experienced a lot of that growing up because I was the only Black person for like hundreds of miles. I feel like I was the only Black kid in school in elementary, only Black kid in junior high, and so those kind of shaped me into, protecting the underdog, recognizing who needs that extra care or extra support, or who might not be feeling seen or heard, because I was definitely that kid. And I turned out pretty okay when I was, not in the best places all of the time. So it's very much so a miracle that I turned out the way I did, because I was kind of bad.
You know what? I relate. I relate. I know you may not know this, but my first 6 years of teaching was in Gila River Indian community. I started teaching there in Sackatoon Middle School.
Wow.
And love the community. I started out as a student teacher there. I did the 6 years as a 7th and 8th grade English language arts teacher. And so my introduction to teaching was on the res, and it was community teaching. It wasn't just the kids, but you were part of the community, going through the to the parade, to the carnival, just really truly being a part of the community. And I still miss that. In fact, had a conversation earlier at a workshop that I was attending with a teacher who also taught in Sackatoon, and she and I didn't really connect there, but we were there at the same time for a few months. And it's just a small world. But anyway, and she said the same thing. She missed the children. She misses the children. And I love the way you really, you highlight it, but you don't highlight it in a negative sense. You say there's trauma there. Absolutely there is. If you're teaching on the res, you understand that, but it's also very much so understood why. There's epigenetics. There's so many things. There's high ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. There's a lot going on. And I can tell you that as a teacher, I was really taught a lot working in that environment first, which means I can teach anywhere, because I have a great understanding of building relationship with students. That's, by the way, that's where I got the name Mama Lyons. My students in Sackatoon named me Mama Lyons, and they still call me that. Yeah, isn't that so? Anyway, I didn't even think about this, but yeah, that's where I started. So I identify with everything you're saying, and I just have such a love for the community as well, and I still do. I really do. I read about children too.
Now I have to, salute to working for Gila River. I used to work for Salt River, and I used to kind of go back and forth and do business. And I remember just being like, oh my God, not Gila today. But, I think the best thing about information, I should say, is recognizing that those systems are real in every community, and it's not limited to, drunk natives and we could say that about each. It literally is systemic. So if you understand how systems are put in place and resources and grants, how grants work. And I think one of the things that I noticed most, and I still get to work with tribal communities, but there's a lot of expectation to conformity. And I grew up in a time and place where that was not an expectation. I share with my husband, like, I remember being in 6th grade and they made us learn on the res, like, exactly what happened to our land, like who took it, when it happened, who involved, and what happened to our people as an effect of that. So like, I never grew up with this, the American government, and I had a very aware sense of exactly what was going on, and then of course you experience it.
So admire that. You have to admire that, though. I think that you were taught, and that you weren't lied to, and and it's, even if you're teaching in that environment, the same thing. I remember learning all about water rights and all of the things that happened. And it's atrocious, but it is what, it's what happened.
Mhm.
So with that though, I think you're rooted in the healing and the social justice and all of those things that contributed a great deal. And you also probably are very much so able to empathize and understand where people are coming from based on your own childhood experiences. Um, and I also think you probably, and this is just my guess, but you're walking out your purpose.
Mm. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I I mean, I guess I could share. When I was adopted, there was this before I was adopted, there was a social worker who kept, coming by the house and things like that
Hmm.
and doing activities with me. From what I can remember, I was like 7.
Hmm.
And when I went to undergrad and graduated and all those things, that my idea of a social worker is that moment of somebody coming to the house asking me these questions and just who is this person. And when I graduated from ASU in 2011, that was like when there was no jobs. You can recall the economy was very much so how it is now. And
Right.
I remember having a conversation with my best friend, and she was like, why don't you look into a master's program, and why don't you, I'm like, yeah, I want to be a lawyer. And she was like, I don't think that's what you want to be. You really, I see how you light up when you help people. And we did a lot of like community work in undergrad. Um,
Hmm.
I really think that you should look at social work. And I remember being like, what? Like, how could
Yeah.
you say that? Like, I'm too great for social work. She was like, you need to chill and look it up. And so I did. And I was like, oh, maybe
Yeah.
I do need to be a social worker, because I had this limited view of what social work entailed. And so when I went to my social work program, I was able to honestly read a lot of what I experienced growing up and put understanding and names and identifying personalities and, disorders or traumas. And it's
Hmm.
like, okay, this is very real. And so I had the opportunity to kind of unpack. As I was learning, I was working through my own stuff, understanding that the child sexual abuse that I experienced as a child is a direct result from boarding schools and Catholic boarding schools and the atrocities that happened, and so you really get to see, okay, this is very much so systemic. And you don't have the resources or the people or the interventions to kind of it perpetuates itself, and so my abuser, which was much so a victim at one point, and it's just, that's kind of the nature. And it's not limited to just Native American communities. Obviously there's a lot of the same mirror
Absolutely.
in the
Yeah.
African American community because of the systemic issues. And so there's a lot of shame rooted in abuse, and there's a lot of shame rooted in uh, coming from these families,
Right.
and
Right.
the normalcy of knowing and not saying anything and keeping the peace. And so those were kinds of the things that I had to unpack in my 19, 20, 21-year-old self, because I'm reading myself in these kind of books, and so I think it was at that moment where I was like, okay, I forgive. I understand. I can move forward. I had to forgive a lot of people in my life, multiple abusers, but at the core of it, I could understand how this has happened and how it has occurred, and so I really think God really guided me and used my best friend as, that vessel to say, like, this is where I need you to be. Because there have been many conversations with foster children, or, children just in systems or in family, whatever the, juvenile justice, whatever that looks like, being
Mhm.
able to sit down with them and say like, nah, I understand. Like, I get it.
Genuinely
Yes,
understand.
authentically, I can empathize, I can sympathize, I can do whatever you want me to do, but I understand,
I'm here with you. Yes.
That's
I agree.
and I know especially when I was working at that tribal community in Salt River, I was like, oh, I think this is why like God needed me to, because I still have relationships with a lot of these children who have aged out, who are living, their adult lives now. And we have special relationships because of that. And I helped guide them out of that. So that really propelled me into my business and creating Social Roots out of a need. How can I say this? Out of a need of the obvious.
Yeah.
I while I was working in for tribal community, I remember being given a case that was nearly 8 years old. And for the state of, most of the states, and for the state of Arizona specifically, if you have a child coming into care, you got like 12 months to kind of wrap this up, because they know what the statistics say about children being outside of the home. And the longer they are, the more issues, the more, so they really want to keep children in the home, put services in the home. And I had this case that was like 8 years old. And I remember just thinking like, what is the issue? Now, this was one of the worst cases of like child incest that I have ever seen, but it was the need and the constant, like, we're putting them back together, and it's going to work, and it's going to work. And I remember having this big blow up with one of my directors, and this is why I quit. But it occurred to me like, oh, well, if there's no kids in care, then there's no social workers, then there's no system, then there's no foster homes, then there's no, so it's this big hamster wheel that feeds itself, because I was giving solutions and they were not interested in solutions. They were not interested in adoption. They were not interested in anything that would close the case, essentially. And so I really felt like, I feels like malicious. It became like a moral issue for me in those moments. I'm like, I think there's something majorly wrong here. And so I ended up resigning, and it was a huge issue, but I resigned, and then I started Social Roots, which is my consulting business. And I started that in 2018. So I've just been kind of doing consulting with social work and community strategy ever since then. But that was like how that was birthed, was out of the experience of working for tribal communities and seeing this American system infiltrating into tribal communities and the conformity with that. So I guess the best way I could say is like, my tribe gets very limited funding from the federal government for a reason, so like any tribal government that has this obsessed amounts of money or is just this big thing, there's going to be a level of conforming to what they think is appropriate in their systems. And that doesn't necessarily coincide with what is appropriate for Indigenous communities, because you're trying to fit like a square into a triangle. Our people are different. We're raised different. Our historical trauma is different. Our sense of community is different. Our sense of therapy is different. So there's just this weird, icky situation that was happening with me. And I said, well, this is a great salary. This is a great 401k, but morally and ethically, I cannot do this. And so that's how I ended up leaving and starting my own thing. And I've just been really free ever since.
That's good. All money's not good money, right? I mean, it just isn't. And I know what you're talking about. I remember students saying to me in different times, in my teaching English language arts. So some of the things that we would go over weren't necessarily culturally sensitive in terms of what was in the curriculum. And so I would say something and the kids would say, Miss, that's the white way. That's that's not how we do things here. And they educated me a lot. And I had to think about it, and I too have a very similar background to you. I experienced the same type of trauma as a child with a stepfather. And I was able to relate. One of my real vivid memories is the first time a female student came to me and expressed the abuse that she was experiencing. And of course, I had, I'm a mandatory reporter, so I had to tell, to get her the assistance that she needed. But and there were many other cases in that time that I was a part of, unfortunately. But it was my own experience with it that allowed me to be able to hear her. And sometimes I can see it without being told.
Yeah,
Right?
you have the eyes to see. Mm-hmm.
You know by the way the kids come to class, how they act, how they withdraw. You just know. And another teacher said to me, sometimes our classrooms are the safest spaces for these kids.
Yeah.
So because of that, I wanted to do more at school to keep them after school. I did the theater program. I did whatever I could do.
Whew, I would have needed you.
Yeah, you would have been great. You would have been great. Listen, they wrote their own plays. They are, I mean, just amazingly creative. One thing for sure, my students were super creative, and you didn't have to give them a lot of direction. You tell them the idea and then let them run with it. And they did wonderful. Yeah, for sure. What were you going to say? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it was yesterday I was talking to my husband about just like being on the res during the worst kind of period of my life. I told him I definitely would have been in juvenile justice and definitely would have had a record, but because I was on the res and the lack of, they don't care about a lot of things. It doesn't warrant, a system, but I was definitely like smoking weed at school, bringing weed as like just doing the absolute most, fighting. I was fighting because, I was the only Black kid. So I was like, let's go. And I was just really on one. And a lot of my relatives and a lot of the people definitely remember like Roicia, like, look at her now. Like, oh my God, she was over here whooping people's butts and being crazy. But they also knew my mom. So what really snapped me out of those, and now I told my husband yesterday, I go, nobody knew that I was like crying for help. And I didn't know how to share that. I didn't know how to put, who would believe me. And if they believe me, what happened? Like, we live with this person. Like, where are we going to go? And it wasn't just me, it was my sister too. So we were trauma bonding over this situation that happened from like 7 to 14, and so there's just a lot of like you said, if you know how to look for these things, you can see it. And I feel like nobody was seeing my things. And now being on the other side and being, a grown person with wisdom, I can look back and be like, dang, nobody must have been a safe person for me. Like, there must have been nobody who, a teacher, like nobody could help me. And so that kind of also was like, I need to be that person. I want to be a safe person for these kids. And a lot of the times, I put my career at risk doing thing. There's a lot of with, coming to a place of like standard and education and licensing and ethics. And so, which again, for me is like a conforming thing, because even during my master social work program, I was like, I know y'all are saying this is the truth or facts, but like, it's not sitting well with me. For example, they tell you as a therapist, like, don't cry with your clients and, blah, 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 and make sure you're like, I'm a human being. If they're telling me like their trauma and I'm going to have a visceral physical reaction, so there's things like that where I'm just like, now I know. Okay. Oh, and I actually wanted to share this because I share this with everybody, that just because we have made, healing this standard of like therapy and blah, 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 like healing is not limited to this American Western ideology framework of individual or group. We had, as Indigenous people, and I'm talking about African Indigenous people too, we had our systems and customs of what healing looks like in community, what healing looks like in ceremony, what healing medicine like in from the earth rather than, prescription medication. Now I understand as a social worker, of course, like there are chemical issues and imbalances that need to be corrected, but there are also alternative methods of healing and dealing with a lot of those physical things inside of us in other ways, like hiking outside is medicine. The sun is water is medicine. So like, how can we incorporate these things as tools, meditation and breath work? So now that I'm in this like new awakening of being able to identify and be able to say out loud without the backlash that I was always right. Like you guys were trying to make me conform to what you think is healing. When I grew up, I tell people it was more, I did not see a doctor until I was like in my 20s.
Right.
Because it's so common for us to go to medicine man. It was so common for us to get our medicine from our land, And so again, just that switch. But this book, and I wanted to share it.
Yes, absolutely. Decolonizing Therapy, Jennifer Mullen.
Yes. This, oh my gosh, I could have wrote this book myself. If you are a reader, read this. Decolonizing Therapy by Jennifer Mullen. She is also Afro-Indigenous, and she's a psychologist. But she really kind of unpacks this American Western framework of medicine. So that includes of like hospital, diagnoses, psychiatry, like even from a spiritual perspective on how people like, oh, they touch, they crazy, when really not being able to like hone in on your spiritual gifts or like listening to, so there's just so many different influences that have been left out of Western medicine and how we treat people. So this book, highly recommend, but it literally helps guide me in the work that I do, because we are in a place right now, we are being able to say America has got it wrong. We've been lied to. The systems have been put in place to perpetuate cycles of slavery. Like we're aware of the 13th Amendment. We're aware of all of these different policies that have been able to infiltrate and continue the cycle without us knowing, So if you keep a person in a perpetual state of survival, they cannot think outside of the here and now. And that really enables us to be able to prepare our children correctly for their futures. It enables us to have healthy homes and families and authentic connections and attachment. So there's just so much getting loaded. And I can go on and on about this, obviously, but
it's very, very good information, and it's important, and it's good to know. Other people need to hear that your cultural background, your ethnicity does play a part in your healing as well. And I think what you're saying is that, we have been accustomed to systems that are pushed out towards us to say, this is the way, this is the only way. I know when I started noticing that, you can just take your shoes off and touch earth and be grounded in its healing. I mean, something so simple as that. I didn't know that, and I'm 61 years old now, and I did not learn that until, like, how would they say? It was like yesterday that I learned that. But those are the types of things.
So they demonize it, they criminalize it. Look at that tree hugger, and it's like literally scientific fact that you can get healing from it. So it's like you don't want to look like a crazy person, but you should, because
religion too. Religion plays a part in that too, and people having their beliefs and things that are meditative or healing can sometimes look at as of and not to debate it, but I definitely know that people are only as good as the knowledge they've been given, and we have that deep identity. You know, we're raised in a family or a system. We were born into it, and that's our starting point. You know, but it's good to know that when you have indigenous roots and you're able to really practice and understand where you come from, that's powerful. And actually, for any listener who is in that situation where maybe you haven't been raised, you know, with that culture, look it up, you know, research it, figure out who you are, right?
I can even add to that because it's so good. Part of what I really emphasize in a lot of my programs with my mental health conference, and then I'm doing this 16 to 24-year-old misattitude cohort. It's a wellness leadership cohort.
Ooh.
I'm trying to cultivate this identity piece because that is the part, that is the reason that was all strategic. And I will say too, like it's not so much as knowing the information, but it's so much as applying. So
Right,
like
right.
once we receive that, it's our duty to say, okay, now that I know, am I going to do better? Lots of the times, and I want to say like 80% of the time, they do
Mhm.
not.
Right,
The people, we do not.
right.
And part of it, yes, is because of what I kind of shared earlier about the survival, you know, stuck in survival mode and being only able to process the here and now.
Mhm.
But also, we make a lot of excuses. We make a lot of excuses based out of convenience. And, you know,
Mhm.
I talk about this all the time. How many times are they going to tell us that McDonald's is trash for our bodies? And you can still see people wrapped around the corner trying to get Chick-fil-A, all of them, you know. So it's not like it's the information is not there. It's the unwillingness to unlearn and commit to being inconvenienced or commit to being and doing something better. So again, that is, I'm not going to say necessarily that's human nature. That is the American way. Um,
Mhm.
they set it up that way. We work 40 hours a week. We need two income households. So like
Mhm.
time to prepare dinners are less, time away from family where our children are not home. And so we have all of these convenience things around us
Right, right.
in in our grocery store on the corner. You know, there's so much convenience. America really thrives off of that because of this rat race that they created that, you know, we can't get out of. And so identity is a big part because also what I appreciate about my mom, God rest her soul, but she was not one to be played with. And so earlier I was going into about like me fighting. I was fighting a lot. And one time I fought my cousin's goddaughter, and it
Mhm.
was kind of bad. By the time I got home, my mom had already heard about it. And
Mhm.
I walked in, and I remember she's already kind of terrifying, but she was like, if you're going to be fighting people, you're going to come home and fight me. And
Mhm.
so you think you're bad, we gonna fight, let's fight. And I was like, ah. So so after that I was like, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to fight, because my mom was very skilled
Mhm.
and strong.
You
So
already knew.
I already knew. So that really kind of like snapped me out of it. But because of her discipline and because of her expectation for me to be different, and one of the things that she always said was like, travel, you know, travel the world. Don't get so caught up in trying to be a wife or a girlfriend, and you know,
Mhm.
come and go. Like, don't get caught up doing that. Like, be different and explore the world. Like, there's so much out there. And it's, I remember, because we were so poor, so poor, so broke, I was like, I don't know if that's possible, but okay, you know. So once
Mhm.
I went to college and I started going to New York and LA, and okay, this kind of cool. Then I started exploring out of the country.
Mhm.
Now, one of the things that really opened my eyes, my first passport stamp was to Ghana, and I was 20 years old.
Mhm.
And it felt like home to me. And it felt like home in so many different ways. I spent about 4 months in Ghana, and I was working as an internship. I did a study abroad. I did I was a research assistant to help them with their new constitution. They were writing a new constitution. And so I was getting picked up in a limousine car every day. It was the best. And I was like, oh my God, but that experience, I was like, oh, I've only been in one other place where everybody looks the same. So me, I was like, I see what's the problem, identity, culture, like when we are all, and that's what they say is like amazing about America, that we're this hodgepodge of different cultures and religions, and and it's really what makes us kind of not on one accord. It's really what the division is that whole, identity thing and claiming to this individualism where, you go to other countries, everybody's on one accord, but same religion. You go to Japan, they're all, everybody looks the same. So I was like, oh, okay. So these people know who they are. These people say that they have their cultures, their customs, their language, and we don't. And that's why we as African-American people really, really struggle with this concept of who are we and why do I matter? Where do I fit in this piece of life? Where is my purpose? Because, and I don't want to say it's erased, because history is there if you're willing to read it, learn it, and unpack it, but it definitely has been kept away from the masses. You have to have a certain want or curiosity to kind of explore that. And a lot of the times when you're stuck in survivor mode, you're not thinking about how you can explore who you are. You're thinking about what food is going on the table for dinner, So it's this constant cycle of keep going, hustle, 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 and not enough time to say, let me pause, think about who I am as a person, what matters to me, who am I without these titles, or who am I without these accolades, and what values are important to me. So there was just a lot of things I kind of picked up throughout my experiences, and traveling really kind of opened my eyes to the indoctrination of what America is and how people view us, how we're viewed in the world. They really had us in this like microcosm of America the Great, and we're so amazing, and everybody wants to be American, and that ain't true. I was lucky that I went to Ghana during a time where Barack Obama was president, and people treated me like royalty. People were like, oh, a Black American, like, welcome home. Oh my gosh, Barack Obama, you guys are like African, y'all are our brothers and sisters, come home, rather than, when I went to Argentina and they were like, is Trump really y'all's president, or is that like a joke? Because we're all kind of laughing and we're waiting for it to be over. We're like, no, he's really the president. So anyways, just seeing this different concept, this global concept of who we are as a country, made me also further unpack, like, hold up, there's a lot of systemic things here, including the manipulation of our people to think that we just have this, and the ability, like the striving, and the, gotta have the car and the house and the this and the that. And it overwhelms us so much that we miss out on what our purpose is in this life.
Yes. It's like the great distraction. Yeah, absolutely. It's like the great distraction. And I know as we get older and mature, a lot of it starts to materialize for us. We start to see, like, I see things so much differently now than I did when I was younger. I think lived experiences, right? But also if you're just paying attention in life. And if you choose to live an authentic life, meaning you're not going along to get along, you really are, able to see things for what they really are. And I, just for the listeners, no one is saying that we don't love America or love where we are, right? Because that's
we can say that it could be better.
You know what? It could be better. Absolutely, it could be better. But that's the first thing that everybody wants to jump on is, you're anti-American. If you no, we're calling it out as it is.
Yeah,
and we are America, by the way. We are America. too. So I had to, because I hate that. It's like a people will point out, you say one thing, but you're really telling the truth. We're in our education system everywhere. There's so much that's not being explored and shared, and our
Mm,
kids are coming up with a whole different perspective. And again, that's probably what I appreciated again on the reservation teaching, where no one was saying you can't teach this or you can't teach that. And in
correct.
fact, you had to incorporate, you had to incorporate, a lot of the cultural messages and a lot of the things. And then also using the language within the classroom. I mean,
Yeah.
I learned a lot of words. I wanted to be able to, identify, speak to the students and say, your culture matters, your language matters. Don't lose your language. Don't give it up. And that's the thing, so.
Mm-hmm. And think about how seen they feel because of that. They're I don't know.
There's a lot of external influences too. I noticed that was creeping onto the reservation. So I think the younger generation kids are starting to let go of it. I think that's the big struggle. It's not cool to be, to follow the culture. It's cooler to do what we see it going on out there in the world, and that's for the elders. I think that was a really big struggle.
My brother and I were talking a little bit about this the day before yesterday, and everything that you're saying is true, and at the same time, it's in alignment with prophecy. And
Mhm.
so, if you know your culture, if you know what world we're in and what is to come, it's in alignment. Just my husband was when I were talking today about like how they said like in the Bible where your children will be whatever parents, and like you start seeing times, and
Mhm.
the signs of the end times and how people will be lovers of themselves, and
Mhm.
there's so much in that. So in each culture we all have those things. Like
Right.
the Bible is
Mhm.
a compilation of different
Yes.
things written by different people and interpreted by different people in languages, and if you speak a different language,
Yeah.
yeah, Council of Nicaea, if you speak a different language, like I speak a different language, that these language that there's no word for that.
Right.
Like
Right.
there's no translation. And
Right.
learning, so I 3 languages. So when I was growing up, even that, so I was like, okay, so if we're in these times and we're experiencing this is what we're going to see, and this is what we're going to see. One of the things,
Mhm.
so that's why
Mhm.
also being knowing your culture, knowing your identity, knowing even if you're African
Mhm.
American, like that's still a culture and that's still an identity. And there's so much to unpack in that. It didn't start with slavery. We have so many people who who are our ancestors, who were inventors and writers and philosophers, and they did a lot. And we see their work every day, the stop signs, and like
Mhm.
there's so many things. So
Absolutely.
if we
But that is how it's taught.
and I was going to say, and to be fair, I grew up in Arizona. My first
Right.
Black teacher, I was 19 years old in
Right.
college. So
Right.
I ended up, and because it wasn't taught in it wasn't, I don't want to say taught, but it wasn't accurate and there wasn't enough tools.
Right.
So I couldn't follow the paper trail enough to get to what I needed to get to. I got to reading, Roots and, Malcolm X's autobiography as told by
Right.
Alex Haley when I was 16. And I'm like, okay, great. What do I do with this? Where's the rest?
Right.
So it wasn't until I was 19 and in college where I was like, okay, now what books and where are these books and who are the people? Because the books they've been telling us to read, are very limited. So, but there's just so much in that. But I for once, saw myself in a teacher at 19 years old, and I shared that story with our friends here in Charlotte, and they cannot believe I have never had a Black teacher.
Oh yeah, you're in North Carolina. That's why. Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
my roots are in North Carolina. My family's from North Carolina, so there's a
Oh,
big difference. My auntie taught, yeah, Clinton, North Carolina is where my mother's side is based.
okay.
Not too far from Fayetteville.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. I know where that's
yeah,
at.
yeah. So one of the things that, and I know Arizona is definitely a different beast. I've had friends who've told me that coming up in school, they got very little Black history or anything like that because,
Any-
there was a lot more emphasis on Hispanic culture and things like that. But honestly, I'm a big proponent of having teachers that resemble their students for that reason, because I think there's a level of identification that's really important, and I just think we need more of that. But um, I want to talk before we, and I really want to talk about mental health because I know that's something that is also near and dear to your heart.
Yes.
Your work in the mental health arena. Can you talk about that more and about your company and what your company does?
Yeah. So, as we shared earlier, I've been a social worker since like 2010 or something, but
Mhm.
or 2011. Been in a lot of different living rooms. I've had a lot of conversations with different family members, with children, with adolescents, and so I've basically been calculating in my head and taking data information. But mental health in Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, because it's not limited. Again, rooted in survival, rooted in the trauma and the systems that they placed upon us. We have come to this place of mental health being something that we don't talk about because of shame. I think that's the main reason is shame and, of course, misunderstanding and
Mhm.
lack of information and resources. Um, I remember being in a home on the South Side with a foster home and having to sit there and talk to this person about this child having ADHD. Now,
Mhm.
very particular about diagnoses, but when a diagnosis is spot on, it's spot on. Okay. So,
Right, right.
and so there's systemic issues in diagnosing children of color also, but this child definitely had ADHD,
Yeah, he
and
was.
distraction to himself and a distraction to other children, which is enabling other children to learn. So it's very much so a problem. And she refused to get this kid any kind of help, whether that was therapy, medication, or whatever. And I was just like, why? Because you, out of your ego, out of shame, whatever, are enabling this child to be the best child that they can be because of this diagnosis that just he can't really control, what is his impulsivity and things like that. So I remember standing there and I'm like, there's got to be a better way. There has got to be a better way to have this conversation. I can't keep doing this over and over and spending hours and hours. And so I went to this conference in New Orleans. I was on the board for the YWCA Metropolitan Arizona, and I got selected from a national pool to be in this women of color, whatever, whatever. So
Mhm.
there's 15 of us throughout the United States, and we
Nice.
went to this conference, and this is where it kind of all happened for me. So this was like 2018, and there was, I'm sorry, 2019. There was Kamala Harris, there was Stacey
Mhm.
Abrams. Every Black woman who was a Black woman who you think you knew was in that room. It was like maybe 1,000 of us. It was so amazing and so insane. I had never felt so held, so seen, and so heard. Everything was Black women, everything, and we were free to be ourselves. So it was a 4-day conference. And on the last day, it was a Sunday, and it was actually a brunch. And
Mhm.
so we were eating, and they're playing music. It was such a great time. If you can imagine just like this sea of Black women, just beautiful and amazing, dancing,
Absolutely.
line dancing. We're having a great time. Beyonce's playing. And so they kind of settled us down, and then we get into the word. And there was a woman pastor who shared a text. It was entitled like Who Will Cry for Tamar, and it was about Tamar being raped and the whole situation. So I am not joking when I say like within 10 minutes of the music getting cut, that I looked back because I was in the front. I looked back and I saw everybody wailing, crying, having a moment. Just, it was the most alarming thing I had ever experienced. In that moment, I heard God say, like, you see what this is, you're going to do something about that. You are going to provide space for them to do just that in your conference, in your space, whatever you're going to cultivate. That's what this is going to be about. Because Black women leading in the most entrepreneurs, we're the most educated, we're the most blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to ourselves and providing space for ourselves and to being able to care for our own mental health, if we're the matriarchs and the leaders and our children are watching us and how we handle stress, how we handle trauma, we're perpetuating it no matter how many degrees we have. So I had to sit and say, like, oh, damn, like my mom was definitely perpetuating this because she was a divorced woman. She had to start from the bottom and work her way up, and she was just hustling and be independent. Don't depend on a man. So then I was like, yeah, I'm independent. I'm gonna do my thing. Nobody can stop me. And it really built that in me.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I relate.
I was like, okay, this is great, but then now look at us. So I had to say, all right, I got to do something about it. So I ended up doing Attitude, a mental health summit for African American women. I did that 4 times, 4 different years, consecutively. The first one was in 2020. So that was like a sold out situation. And every year it just kept getting better and better and better. And I'm like, oh my gosh, of course. And then I started implementing, the last 2 years, I started implementing spirituality into that, because what I also started to discover is Black people, not to say there's anything wrong with this, because we do need to pray and we do need to rely and have faith in the Lord, but faith without works is dead. And a lot of what we do is rely on faith, and we don't go to therapy. We don't see that we have a chemical imbalance that we might need to take antidepressants for, that we might need to be prescribed, So,
Preach.
Yeah. So that's kind of, that's what attitude is. Attitude is like, cut the shit, excuse me, but let's really cut the shit. Let's talk about some things, because we're over here perpetuating these things. We're leading in these areas, Black maternal health. Like, there's so many things that we need to discuss as a group, as Black women, so that we can become aware, informed, educated. We can advocate for each other better. We can advocate for our families better, as long as we have the tools. So what I did was remove the bias by just allowing Black women only as the speakers, as the doctors, So I had psychiatrists come and speak, and hey, let's ask some questions about medication, because y'all don't want to ask these questions with your children in the room and you don't think that they need it. So let's unpack that. So we've done some topics from everywhere, to rest as resistance, to Black maternal health, to, even breast cancer screenings at these places, because Black women also lead in breast cancer. So any type of disproportionate health impact, health inequity that is happening to Black women, not just limited to mental health, but to our physical health too, because we love cooking and we love the things, and diabetes now, cholesterol, so like we really just wanted to pack this whole wellness situation. Yes, mental health is the focus, but really wholeness and holistic health is kind of where my approach is, because that includes identity, that includes healing. Let's unpack where you are in your life, where you're going, and are you being insane by perpetuating the same cycle and the same things and trying to think that you're going to get a different result, because that's insanity. So what in your life do you want to change? And knowing that you have the power to change that, what are you willing to do? Ego aside, shame aside, what are you willing to do?
And I think people need to really acknowledge, because what you just said is so true. The data suggests there's a problem here. And when people ask the question of, well, why are you just focused on? Because I have well-meaning friends who are not a person of color who will say, I don't understand why the focus on black this or black that. It's like, pay attention to the data, understand the systems that we've dealt with in this country for so long, and know that this is real. We're not just vying for attention. This is real. There's a real need for, some of the work that's being done in our communities to get people to realize who you are. And when I think about young people, when I think about young people who are just coming up, they don't have the context that even we have with our history and our past. And as each year goes by, we're getting further and further away. So younger people, if within the home we don't teach it, if we don't, that awareness leaves, but also hope leaves. There's so many things that could be good tied to understanding who you are, the pride, the pride in who you are. So with that, I absolutely agree with you. This is good stuff. It really is. I'm looking forward to more of your events that are coming up. I want to have you back when you know something like this is about to happen, because I feel like there's so much more we could talk about. We could go and go and go. We're at the hour, but man, I could really, continue, because this is important. And I want to note, and I know I've already shared this with you. I wanted to have this conversation with you today because today marks the 2 years ago today, my mom passed away. And this was when I was thinking about who would I have as a guest today. I really needed the context to be on in this topic, because I feel like my mom didn't live her life. I feel like my mom missed out on so much because of her childhood and because of so many other things that happened. And I think it takes yourself, myself, people like us. We have to do better, so that the women and men coming after us, is more open to being authentic, to living their best life, to experiencing the things that my mom never got to experience. And I know, maybe, I don't know with your mom or your dad if you feel the same way, but we're just so much more evolved because we are in a generation, and I think you and I are in two different generations, but nonetheless, we're still more progressive than our parents were. And so much to do with the availability of information, having less fear to be open and to explore, and to keep it real. My mom's health wasn't the greatest. Her mental health wasn't the greatest. And I just think her. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about my mom. And I don't think about how, she missed out on so much just for lack of information, for lack of willingness to be open, to know that life could be better, that she could manifest a better life. And yeah, she was in the church. She grew up with faith, but it's faith without works. It's dead.
Yeah.
So it saddens me, but at the same time, I feel like I still want to honor her, because whatever my granddaughter needs to know, that things can be different, that she is empowered, that she can be a shero. You know what I mean?
Yes. And even we talked about this earlier about your mom, and yes, please, rest in peace. And I know what it's like to lose a mom and have the feelings and kind of unpack the realness of what that or who that person was. My mom was a lot of great things too, but she was also a lot of things that, girl, you didn't have to do that. You chose better or whatever.
Right.
But I think that there's so much beauty in giving grace to their experiences. Like, I am 36 years old. I cannot imagine being a mother at any other age that I was at up until, like, being 20 and trying to figure it out, with 20-year-old brain, being 25, being a Black woman, trying to navigate this world and the systemic issues and like the confusion and the fear. The fear was so real for them, you know, and God, like there's so much in that it's just like, you know, they did the best that they can do. They provided the best experiences that they thought they could provide for us to be able to say, this is the best I can do, you know. We that like going to Flagstaff and being, you know, the weekend at the Motel 6 was the best thing in the world. Now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I was like, I can't sleep at a Motel 6 no more, you know, but my mama thought it was the best thing. So we thought it was the best thing.
That is so real.
You know? So it's just like, okay, God, help me understand and help me give grace and understanding to be able to not live with and harbor such resentment, or, you know, and the same thing for my father and my biological parents, and continuously having to forgive my biological mother for the pain that she inflicted and the parental alienation that she did to my father. And it's like, girl, you know, now I gotta go down this road with you. And so there's just so much, I feel like there's just so much of a need to give grace to others and to just have understanding that people, this is our first time here on earth. Like, this is our first time. We didn't come here knowing how to be a human at all, you know, let alone being a Black person living in America. So how do we honor that? But also, how do we take what their experiences were, positive or negative, and move forward with that? And like, I'm not going to do that, or I am going to do that, or this is what I choose to carry with me, and this is the recipes that I choose to pass down. You know, there's just so much, I feel like, deep-rooted love and grief. And if you've ever grieved someone close to you, like a parent or a child, there is just a different level of love, but also understanding that God is sovereign and God is love and he's never left you, you know? And so you have to find your balance of that mental health piece of like having the resentment and the anger towards your parents, or the regret or the sadness, whatever those feelings are, but then also holding space. Two things can be true at the same time.
Right.
So holding space for, hey, they're just a human too. They thought they were doing the best, and maybe they didn't have the opportunity to go to therapy, and maybe somebody told them someday that, you know, God's word and the pastor was the only thing, and, you know, we don't know. We don't know.
You're right. Yeah, I thank goodness everything you're saying, I realized it before she passed. And I was her only. I'm not my father's only, but I was my mother's only child. So when she went into hospice and I was at her bedside, I had the opportunity to talk to her, and I'm so grateful to let her know how I felt, because my mom I used to say to her all the time, why can't you just love me? Because she always had such a difficult time with me. And I understand, not difficult because I made it difficult necessarily. I mean, I wasn't perfect, but I was a pretty good kid and didn't get into trouble. However, she and I were so different. And what I realized is that I took after my father's side of the family so much that my mother couldn't stand it. And she had a hard time with it.
That heartbreak, right? It's a reminder that she wasn't chosen or whatever. It's a reminder. Yes.
And so she had a hard time with me, but on the end, I said to her, you know, I know you always tell me you did not know, because my mother was abandoned by my grandmother and she had a tough childhood. And I said, I knew you didn't know what, because she'd say to me, what does love look like? What does that look like? I have no idea. But I knew she loved me. She might not have been able to define it, but she was proud of me many times. But she just, it was just, we were like oil and water. So on the end, I had a chance to talk to her at her bedside the night before she passed. And she acknowledged by nodding, and it made me feel so good. But honestly, I still had no idea she was passing. So it was like, I thought there'd be more time. You know, and as I reflect, it's been 2 years and it feels like it was still just yesterday. It's like I'm still struggling with the loss of her, because I think our parents are like supernatural to us, almost like they shouldn't go anywhere. Like, I don't know.
No,
Um,
that's real.
you
You
know
know,
what I mean?
I had to I read this book called the five love languages.
Yeah.
And it was then too that I had to realize, like, oh, my mom, she wasn't, she would say, I love you, but like showing love, something about the boomer generation,
Right. Yeah.
acts of kindness, like acts of service, excuse me, acts of
Hmm.
service. I was like, oh, that's how she chose to show love. And just because I didn't receive it as, oh, this is love, that don't mean that she didn't love me. Like, she made sure that we have food on the table. She made sure that if I wanted, fry bread, she would make it.
Right.
It was things like that. And again, that's where grace comes in. That's like, we all get to.
Maturity to even see it and recognize it. That took me a long time. I think I was in like late 30s, 40s where I started to really understand, what was going on with my mother. But that she, the ways in which she showed it, to your point, it might not have looked like I wanted, but it was the ways in which she showed it. But nonetheless, I knew for some reason, instinctively, maybe divine, you were the right guest for today, because this conversation is very cathartic for me. It's helping me as well. And I don't know. I am so grateful for people like yourself that have dedicated your life to, not only the social justice, but also the mental health arena and working with youth. All of those things are so important. And for anyone out there listening that has an inkling to go in that direction, please do it. Please do it. It's so needed, right?
Yes.
And
And
I
it's doing it your own way.
say it again.
And it's just know that it's okay to do it in your own way. Like,
Right.
nobody told me to do this. I just figured it out, and people are loving it. So if it doesn't look like anybody else's way, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, how do you get clients, or how does that work? How do people find you, or do they find you, or are you connected at the government level, social services? Explain that a little bit.
Oh, yeah. So I do have, so socialrootsllc.org is my consulting business website. And that's kind of where I do like the one-on-ones, resilience coaching and things like that. I don't have any clients at this time, which I'm okay with, but I do other contracts, out of that, but the one-on-one kind of thing, if that was an option, we can find. And my husband does, he does his therapeutic services too. But on my nonprofit side, so that's my business side of my nonprofit side, the Social Roots Foundation, llc.org, that's where I get to do the fun things. And so my mental health conference, if you're interested in that, that's where you find that information. If you were interested in, signing your daughter up for Miss Attitude, that's where that information is housed. But I'm just a one-woman show. So I wish I had a team, and I wish I was, this executive director with brick and mortar and all the things. But most of what I get to do is this right here, online platforms like this, educate, empower, and inform. Being in spaces like this is really, really important to me. So I thank you for having me, and thank you for feeling like I was in alignment for this day that's so special to you. And I take honor in that. My mom's birthday is coming up on Wednesday. Yeah, so January 7th, and that's my mom's birthday. And then my late brother is on the 8th, and then my sister is on the 14th. But
Special time as well.
yes, it's very heavy too, right? Because your body remembers, that your mind remembers, like, the new year has started, and it's like, okay, let me prepare my brain for the grief. Let me prepare myself for the ups and downs. And to be truthful, there's no real preparation. You just kind of go through the motions and hold space. But it's part of this wonderful journey of life, and just seeing it as an opportunity to be grateful that, you were given the opportunity to love. Lots of people. My mama wasn't perfect, but that was my rider, like,
Right.
and I thank God that I turned out to be who I am because of her, like the discipline. And, there was some things she was carrying, but you know, I know I made it out because, you know, she pushed me more than the average. But there's things about our loved ones that we can kind of extract and say thank you for these pieces because they meant the most in this moment, you know.
That is so true. That is so true. And I often think about that with myself, that I am who I am today also because of my mother. And I have to be grateful for that.
Yeah.
Because I love what I do. Uh, I love how I enjoy standing up for and serving others, especially the youth. And so I know that every experience I had leading up to now is why I'm able and capable of doing that. And it's the same for you, right? Oh my gosh, you're going to be coming back. In fact, do get off the line, hang
Yeah.
on backstage,
Okay.
and and I will definitely continue to speak with you because I'd like to have you back. I
Yeah.
know that there's a lot that we did not cover.
Yeah.
So listeners, this isn't the last you're going to see of Roicia. You're going to see more of her. But there's just so much that we can talk about. And I know there's so many aspects of things that you're doing that we didn't touch on.
Yeah.
But this time goes so fast when you're having a conversation,
I
right?
know. My husband's like, what are you doing? Are you done? I'm like, oh, okay, I'm done. I'm done.
I know they say we shouldn't go this long, but we do. There's just so much to cover. So just yeah, like I said, don't go away. To our listeners, thank you so much for hanging in there, for listening, for commenting. I wasn't paying attention to comments because I love to focus on my guest, but most definitely this has been um, live streamed on so many different platforms. So there's a lot of different eyes on it, and we will, we're just very grateful for those who are in there. Okay, all right. So I am going to sign off at this point. Um, Thank you again for listening. Next week we'll be back with next Sunday will be the Coach's Corner, and stay tuned for who the guest is. Again, I appreciate you all so much. All right.